In the bustling city of Aldoria, where towering skyscrapers kissed the clouds and neon lights painted the night sky, crime and corruption had become a way of life. The wealthy elite prospered in their ivory towers, while the poor languished in the dark alleys below. In a world where the line between good and evil was blurred, hope was a rare commodity. But even in the darkest corners of the city, a flicker of light was about to emerge, a hero unlike any other, known only as the Shadow Healer. His real name was Eamon Grey, a humble physician working in a rundown clinic on the outskirts of the city. Eamon had always been different. Born with a rare condition that left his skin hypersensitive to sunlight, he was forced to live most of his life in the shadows. But this curse also came with a gift, an ability to sense the pain and suffering of others as if it were his own. While it made his work as a doctor both excruciating and rewarding, Eamon never imagined that his unique sensitivity would lead him down a path that would change his life and the lives of countless others forever. Eamon's life took a drastic turn one fateful night when a mysterious figure entered his clinic. The man was badly wounded, bleeding from a deep gash across his chest. His eyes were wild with fear and desperation as he collapsed at Eamon's feet. Without hesitation, Eamon rushed to help him, but as he touched the man's wound, something extraordinary happened. A dark energy flowed from the man's body into Eamon's, and the wound began to close right before his eyes. Eamon recoiled in shock as the man's pain coursed through his own veins, leaving him breathless and trembling. The man, now fully healed, looked at Eamon with awe and gratitude before slipping into unconsciousness. It was in that moment that Eamon realized his true gift. He could heal others by absorbing their pain and illness into his own body. But this gift came at a price. Each time he healed someone, he took on a portion of their suffering, both physical and emotional, which lingered within him like a shadow. Over time, Eamon's abilities grew stronger, and so did the toll they took on his body and mind. He began to heal more people in secret, those who couldn't afford proper medical care or were too afraid to seek help from the authorities. Word of the Shadow Healer spread through the city like wildfire, and soon Eamon found himself being sought out by the desperate and the dying. But the more he healed, the more pain he absorbed. It wasn't just physical wounds he took on. It was the trauma, the fear, the despair of those he helped. Eamon's body became a vessel for their suffering, and the weight of it all threatened to crush him. His once vibrant eyes grew dark and hollow, and his body weakened under the strain. Yet, despite the agony, Eamon couldn't bring himself to stop. He couldn't turn away from those in need, even if it meant sacrificing himself in the process. As his reputation grew, so did the dangers. Criminals began to see him as a threat, and they sought to either control or eliminate him. Eamon was forced to hide in the shadows, moving from place to place to avoid capture. But no matter how much he tried to stay hidden, the cries for help continued to reach him, and he couldn't ignore them. Eamon's journey took a dark turn when he encountered a powerful crime lord known as Viktor Voss, a man feared and respected throughout Aldoria. Voss had built his empire on the suffering of others, exploiting the weak and the vulnerable. When he learned of the Shadow Healer, he saw an opportunity to gain even more power. Voss sent his men to capture Eamon, but they underestimated the hero's resolve. Though weakened by the pain he carried, Eamon fought back with a ferocity that surprised even him. The shadows themselves seemed to come alive at his command, wrapping around his enemies and pulling them into darkness. It was as if his own suffering had awakened a new power within him, a connection to the shadows that allowed him to manipulate them to his will. Despite his newfound abilities, Eamon was eventually captured and brought before Voss. The crime lord offered him a deal: heal his men, make them invincible, and in return Eamon would be spared and given all the resources he needed to continue his work. But Eamon refused. He couldn't allow his gift to be used for evil, even if it meant his own death. Voss was furious and decided to make an example of Eamon. He tortured him, pushing him to the brink of death, but Eamon's will remained unbroken. In a final act of defiance, Eamon unleashed the full extent of his power, drawing upon the shadows that had become his constant companions. The room plunged into darkness, and one by one Voss's men fell, their own pain and suffering turned against them. Voss, realizing he was outmatched, tried to flee, but Eamon caught him. With a touch, Eamon absorbed the crime lord's pain, every sin, every act of cruelty, every moment of regret. The weight of it was almost too much to bear, but Eamon held on, determined to end Voss's reign of terror once and for all. The crime lord crumbled before him, a broken man, his mind shattered by the horrors he had inflicted upon others. Eamon emerged from the confrontation with Voss victorious, but at a terrible cost. The pain he had absorbed from the crime lord was unlike anything he had ever experienced. It tore at his soul, threatening to consume him from within. For days he wandered the streets of Aldoria, lost in a haze of agony, his mind fractured by the weight of the suffering he carried. But as he teetered on the edge of madness, something miraculous happened. The people he had healed began to seek him out. Not for help this time, but to offer their gratitude. One by one they came to him, sharing their stories of how he had saved them, how his sacrifice had given them a second chance at life. Their words were like a balm to his wounded soul, reminding him of why he had chosen this path in the first place. With their support, Eamon found the strength to keep going. He realized that he couldn't carry the burden of pain alone. He needed to find a way to release it, to heal not just others, but himself as well. And so he sought out the ancient texts and forgotten rituals of shadow magic, hoping to find a way to cleanse himself of the darkness that threatened to consume him. Through his research, Eamon discovered a ritual that could transfer the pain and suffering he had absorbed into the shadows themselves, dispersing it across the fabric of the night. It was a risky and dangerous process, one that could potentially destroy him if not done correctly. But Eamon was willing to take the risk. He knew that if he didn't, he would eventually succumb to the darkness within him, and the city would lose its only hope. On the night of the ritual, Eamon stood alone in the heart of the city, the shadows swirling around him like a living entity. He began the incantation, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his heart. The shadows responded to his call, rising up to meet him as he channeled all the pain and suffering he had absorbed into them. As the ritual progressed, Eamon felt the weight of the pain lift from his shoulders, the darkness retreating from his mind. But with each passing moment, the shadows grew more chaotic, threatening to break free of his control. He knew he was running out of time. If he didn't complete the ritual soon, the shadows would consume him entirely. With a final burst of strength, Eamon completed the incantation, releasing the last of the pain into the shadows. For a brief moment there was silence, and then the shadows exploded outward, dispersing into the night like a storm. Eamon collapsed to the ground, exhausted and drained, but alive. The city was quiet as he lay there, the shadows no longer whispering in his mind, the pain finally gone. Eamon had paid a heavy price, but he had succeeded. He had not only healed others, but had also found a way to heal himself. He had become more than just a man. He had become a legend, a symbol of hope in a city that had long since forgotten what it meant to believe in heroes. In the days that followed, stories of the shadow healer spread throughout Aldoria. Some spoke of him as a savior, others as a myth, but all agreed that his actions had changed the city for the better. Crime rates began to drop, and people started to help one another in ways they hadn't before. It was as if the darkness that had once enveloped the city had been lifted, replaced by a newfound sense of hope. As for Eamon, he continued his work in the shadows, healing those in need and protecting the city from unseen threats. He had found a balance, a way to use his gift without being consumed by it. And though he would always carry the scars of his past, he knew that they were a reminder of his purpose, of the lives he had saved, and the sacrifices he had made. And only then the shadow healer became a beacon.